Well, it's 6 o'clock, and we will begin. Welcome to the Northeast Community Development Initiative Oversight Committee meeting number 12, if you can believe that. Yeah, been at this for a little bit now. It is April 19th. It is 6 o'clock, and we are going to begin. I'm Dr. Stephen Holt, and I am the facilitator for tonight's meeting. Shanisha, do you have the agenda in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. And anyone else that is here, trust you have the agenda as well, had a chance to sign in. We're just going to move along according to what is outlined. Let me state what I always state, and that is that this is a meeting that's open to the public, but not a public meeting. And that simply means that we are following the agenda, and there will be opportunities and space for people to weigh in and to share. Our preference is that you address the items that are being discussed on the agenda. However, due to the openness of the committee, whatever's on your heart related to the work going on in North and Northeast that this committee is responsible for overseeing, they're more than willing to hear your thoughts. Your voice is important. With that being said, we will go directly to co-chair Lisa Posey.
Good evening, everyone. Second on our agenda is to approve the meetings from last month's meeting. So if you could just take a moment to read over those meeting minutes that have been supplied to you, we can vote to approve them.
And I am remiss, co-chair. One of the things I did not do was take roll call. I didn't give a chance for everybody to identify themselves. So to make sure that we have the quorum, we will start by the person who's on the phone, or all people on the phone. Shanisha, are you still there?
Yes, I am. I'm still here.
Okay, if you would just identify yourself.
Okay, this is Shanisha Smith. I've been on one of the committee members for a while now, and I'm in here listening because I don't feel good enough to go out today, so I'm listening I'm entering in by telephone.
Thank you, Shanisha. Let's go right down the line.
Leisha Posey.
Haben Noldu.
Maurice Roming, present.
Karen Ward.
Oscar Arana.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to minute review. Do we have another person on the phone line tonight? Did someone just call in? No? Okay.
Are there any questions? All right, so by using your handy dandy red and green cards, all those in favor of approving the minutes, just raise your card. Shanisha, did you have any questions?
No, not right. Currently, right now, I don't have any questions, Lisa.
Okay, perfect. Great. Minutes approved.
Item 3 on our agenda is open communication. Public comment period on non-agenda items, if there are any. I don't think we have anyone signed up, so.
Okay. Khan, are you on the line?
I am.
Okay, perfect. Do you have the agenda with you?
I do.
Okay, we are on open communication, but it looks like we have no one signed up, so we will move on to number 4.
Item number 4 then, which we are calling old business, and that is for some report outs. Has Karis Stoudemire, Karis, have you made it in yet? Have you called in? Well, we will come back to Karis. We'll begin with the investment allocation in Haben.
Okay. The investment reallocation subcommittee met 3 times. The first meeting, the people present in the meeting were Leisha, myself, Maurice, Kimberly, and Conley via phone. We looked at the annual report and we were trying to understand the different breakouts. The items that stood out to us were some of the categories that had 0 funded to date. For example, the ADU program is no longer happening. Where's that money getting allocated? So we wanted more answers to things like that. We also discussed how the annual report did not give enough clarity and did not give committee transparency on the numbers. An example was the outreach spend was $41,000, and it seemed a bit too high as we haven't had much outreach, and we requested that we get detailed breakdown of that budget. And we also wanted clarity on what was Prosper Portland money and what was money that Prosper Portland gave out for administration by different agencies. For example, it was not clear that the home repair, down payment assistance, and ADU dollars were administered by Portland Housing Bureau. We decided that we needed Portland Housing Bureau to be present for us to ask them questions on why the money that hasn't been spent to date and understand the reasons behind it. So we hope before the May meeting to have a conversation with Portland Housing Bureau on different questions on how the money's being spent or why they haven't spent the money so that we can do a better report out for the whole committee. The second meeting we had, the people that were present were Oscar, Leisha, Maurice, Kimberly from Prosper Portland, Karanja Cruz from the community, and myself. We discussed why we have loans and not more grants when the whole mission of the $32 million that we're recommending is to build equity in the community. We are going to have a follow-up meeting with the lending officers at Prosper Portland and Sue Kim at Prosper Portland to find out what steps to take to change loans into grants and how does that impact the overall budget and money. The outreach budget breakdown was provided to us, but it was $20K less than the overall budget. We were told overall budget of $41,000. So we're still waiting for a correct budget breakdown so that we can figure out where outreach money is being spent. Third meeting we had was a smaller one. We met Leisha, Maurice, and myself, and Conley on the phone. We discussed the outreach budget again. The whole outreach budget bucket is $900,000, and we discussed about possibly creating a budget breakdown of the $900,000 so that Prosper Portland is held accountable and we know where the money's going and how effective it is to reaching our outreach goals. We also discussed how there's a lot of lack of getting information on time and accuracy of information that can be frustrating, and we discussed different ways that we can address that, and we decided that we need to have more follow-up meetings on that. And then we also discussed because investment allocation and outreach committees work overlaps so much, making them one subcommittee. Like our work overlaps and it's interconnected, and outreach committee has not had to date any active leadership, so that was a recommendation made. We're gonna have more meetings and more report outs on the next May meeting because we do think the investment reallocation is an important subcommittee, and we had a good set of meetings to start the ball rolling on really digging deep into these numbers. But what we realized is we have more work to do, and it's a lot more complicated than we realized. So stay tuned for more follow-ups after our future meetings. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Haben. Are there any questions?
Only one. Has the meeting been set for meeting with Portland Housing Bureau? You mentioned about requesting that. Do you have a date for that yet? No.
I have communicated your concerns with the Portland Housing Bureau, and they're in the process of developing a report that looks at the spending to date and also answering some of the questions about why there has not been any money going out for down payment assistance as well as in the ADU. So
Will they be able to meet with us?
I can follow up on that. I'm sure they wouldn't mind. And I'm not sure, maybe you can provide the right staff to be there, and should there be a member of the North Northeast Housing Oversight Committee as well? Maybe, I know Leslie will probably be one of the members there, but should we also reach out to the North Northeast Housing Subcommittee member as well? But
Yeah, our goal is before the next May meeting to have a meeting with the Portland Housing Bureau to answer more questions so we can provide clarity to the whole committee, and also meet with the lending officers at Prosper Portland about the loan versus grant and how it impacts the overall work that we're trying to do.
And Andrea Mathiasen will probably be the right person to talk to us about that, and she's the one preparing the report for the.
Can we have ahead of that meeting, can we have just the process, the application, and how they do their selection? And so it would be helpful for us to have that stuff ahead of the meeting. And so as they deploy these funds, just again, the
Okay.
process, the application,
And the approval process.
and their approval process. Thank
Sure.
you.
And so you would like to have this meeting before we meet for our general meeting? So.
Yeah, it's safe to say we probably will have 2 or 3 meetings before the next meeting. For anyone that wants to join us, we typically have been meeting at 7:30 a.m. on Friday mornings. That's subject to change, but we would like, if other people want to be involved in part of the meeting, we usually meet at Prosper Portland at 7:30 a.m. On Fridays.
I would like to ask you to reconsider consolidating both the community outreach and allegation investment, because I think it's really two separate efforts. With the allegation investment, it really is a more budget, looking at the finances, and it's a heavy lift, and I think it should be separated from the community outreach. But that's just my request, for you can consider. But I understand the capacity issue when you don't have anyone from the committee leading the community outreach.
So I think that right now, because of the capacity issue, it is combining the two subcommittees is what's best for this committee, so that we don't feel overrun or overwhelmed. So it's not to say that we will always have to stay that way, that as people are able to sign on, take on more responsibility, we may be able to separate again. But when we looked at the two committees and the people serving on them, there was already some overlap. And then there were those that have fallen off since. So that's kind of the reasoning behind that. But it doesn't have to remain that way throughout the duration of the time of the committee. So.
And when you look at it, those two committees overlap more than any other, just because of the nature of the kind of stuff that we're working on. But yeah, like Leisha said, it's we haven't had any leadership on the outreach front. We haven't had much success on the outreach area, and so while we're meeting for investment reallocation, I think we've been consistently meeting, and it's the same group of people dedicated showing up, and so why not utilize that spirit and meet as a committee? And I mean, I totally understand that maybe we do that, like we
At some
separate them for
point.
the next fiscal year, but for this year, maybe we finish out the year
Okay, yeah,
as combined.
sounds good.
And I would just also like to say, Kim, to you and to Prosper Portland staff, that we need more leadership from Prosper Portland in terms of what you traditionally do, what you are doing. There hasn't been that level of communication back and forth around outreach. So all I know right now is that we send out email notices, but I don't know what other types of outreach is being done by Prosper Portland. So being able to have that open communication about that, and then being able to follow that lead on how we can fill in the gaps or improve, I think that would be beneficial for us as we try to work towards letting people know about the funds.
Okay, I received that.
Okay, any more questions around the investment allocation subcommittee meeting? Anyone on the phone with questions?
I had a question, but I have to come back to it. I'm kind of lost in the translation.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Is that Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Okay, we can come back to you for sure.
I'll hold on. Yeah, thank you.
All right, we will move to A3, Project Charter. Maurice, I think you're taking the lead on that. Wayne and Kimberly.
Mind if I take this spot here, Kim?
Yeah, you could take
So is
Excuse
this-
my limited mobility. Madam Co-Chairs, members of the committee, Dr. Holt, members of the public, colleagues, good to see you all. The quorum issue is what we want to discuss. So we had a chance to meet between Kimberly and Co-Chair Posey and I about a week ago, maybe 10 days, and discovered that there was a disconnect and between what the understanding and the intent of what the committee wanted in terms of being able to fill its quorum, and the drafting error was on me. So you need to, the question was, can we use proxies to fill up the number of seats for purposes of forming a legal quorum for a meeting? And I kept looking at it and going, well, no. Didn't realize that language had been drafted into an initial version of your charter. So either through faulty version control or an error in the drafting, none of which is an excuse, just an explanation. That's all on me. But the legal answer to that question is no, proxies may not be used to form up a majority for a quorum. So I think that was the main stumbling block or open issue, if you will, about the charter. But I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have, or field the stones, because it doesn't belong on any of the rest of them. It's on me.
So I have a question. So when can proxies be used? And what was your thinking? Because there was a long conversation
Yes.
with this committee about proxies. And so I think everyone on the committee understood what we were looking at for a proxy. And obviously, from what we're hearing now, that is incorrect. We cannot use proxies in the way that we believe, or the way we believe that we can use proxies. So my question to you now is, how can we use proxies, and in other committees, how do they use proxies?
Sure. So the focus at the time, and I should have become involved in the process a little earlier, and I might have caught the issue more quickly, but was how large was the committee going to be? Are we going to be able to get people at the table? How are we going to get maximum distribution of the information? So Maurice, that's where my focus was, directly was, okay, how do I satisfy the desire to get as much participation in as possible? And wasn't looking at the technical issue about proxy. Okay, and so what we had written in there was they would be both voting and non-voting. So the idea for proxies that I understood at the time was we would be able to have people to come in and share the information out to make sure there was enough outreach out into the community that if one of you couldn't be here, someone could come on your behalf and pass along the information. And that's where the disconnect happened. I should have been involved maybe a little earlier so to make it clear that, so that I would have understood that what you were intending was, no, maybe we want to have alternates that can sit in our place and actually vote on behalf. If we were not a public body, then you can use proxies to fill in a voting seat. But it's just because the nature of us being a public body and you being a public advisory committee, that is the legal rule.
So is it my understanding that you could have a proxy sit in your seat, but that proxy cannot be a voting member, but it is used to create quorum?
Cannot be used to create
Okay.
quorum. Cannot.
And so on any, I know in the private sector, you like you said, you could have proxies. Where is that the only area in which proxies can be used, and how are they used outside of the private sector?
It really is a limitation that's coming from the state law that's keeping you from being able to use proxies as voting, because it's not uncommon in the private sector, and even in other states, and other, but under Oregon law, it's never actually been taken directly to the court. It's been taken to the attorneys general for direct opinions, and it's in their written opinions, it's been, we will not allow people that are not full voting members of the committee to stand. It's just a quirk of Oregon law, I guess you would call it. But you are correct. In a corporation or a nonprofit organization, that wouldn't necessarily be the same. But it's sort of, I would think of it this way, sort of like the public meeting notices. You're not required to do that for private meetings or other nonprofits, but you are required to do that for this, or have our records open and available. So I apologize for any delays, wastes of time, or miscommunications.
So there's no government bodies that have proxies being used in the state of Oregon?
Not that I'm aware of that are, I mean, you can use them, but not as voting members of the body. If there is, that would be good information and precedent for us to have. And also remember, not all bodies that meet as advisory bodies are considered public bodies under the public meetings and public records laws. Because of the way you are constituted, you are, because we'll make recommendations that will go up to the voting body.
And so you also cannot give a proxy to a sitting committee member to meet quorum? And so if I was absent per se, and I said I want to give a proxy to Haben, can I do that or not?
If you're sitting in the room, you could,
If I'm absent and want to give a proxy so that they can have quorum to continue the process, and so is it possible for her to have my vote as well as her own?
so long as the proxy is established for the meeting. So you wouldn't have to be there. You could say, Haben can have my vote for me, but you would have to be present to have formed the quorum. I can't think of a situation where that might factually play out, but
I guess in some of the other boards I was sitting in, you could do a write-in, and I could write a document. Let's say I'm absent next month. I could then give a piece of paper, submit it, and say, I'm going to be absent, but I want to make sure that you have quorum, so I am giving my proxy to X. Can we do that?
no.
Okay, and fair enough.
My question is, if you are going to be present, why would you
Hello?
need a proxy?
I'm sorry.
Well, that's why I
think,
say I can't see where that would come up, but, pardon me, Kim.
Shanice's trying to say something. For some reason, the volume is not up. No. Can you try it again?
Can you hear me now? This is Shanisha.
Yes, barely, so.
Okay, so what I'm hearing though is that a proxy can be what's called a powerless placeholder.
In general, a proxy can be used as a placeholder and to place a vote on behalf of another party. It's just for what we've found is that for purposes of forming a quorum under Oregon law, you cannot use a proxy. It has to be a full voting member of the committee.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat what you just said?
Sure. So for purposes of forming a quorum, you have to be a full voting member of the committee, not a proxy.
Okay.
But before that, what did you say?
You're going to have to help me, Madam Co-Chair.
Because the language is it's changing. I mean, you're probably saying the same thing, but you're saying it in a different way, and it's confusing to me.
Yes, ma'am.
Because it sounded like you were saying a proxy can be used for something, for voting.
No, they can't be, they can be used for voting, but not to form a quorum. See, but I can't tell you of a factual situation where I could see that would work out. That would be like literally like somebody calling in and saying, well, I'm here to form the proxy. You go ahead and vote for me. That's a factual situation where that would happen. But for forming the quorum, you can't use the proxy.
Okay, so if the quorum is here, but someone is absent, they can give someone a proxy for their vote because we already have established the quorum.
That's correct.
Okay.
Which is kind of confusing as well, too. I understand.
Yeah.
Just,
Any further discussion from the committee?
I
So-
just want,
I'm sorry, go ahead,
no
Marcus.
worries. I just wanted to make one clarity piece. You're saying for the full voting member, as far as a proxy, so if I was to give a proxy to another full voting member, that means that voting member has two proxies. You're saying that even though they might have two, or a proxy, that member still, at that point, if I leave, you lose quorum, although,
that's right.
okay.
Yep. So that's what I'm saying. It'd be an odd circumstance to give a proxy to someone where you were actually there as well, too. I mean, we could speculate those, but I've never seen a situation like that. Okay. Are there any other questions about the charter itself?
I would like to just explain. There was a few changes that was made. A lot of them was pretty minor. On the first page, we noticed that it should have said oversight. It should have said achieve the objectives of the Northeast Community Development Initiative. And on page 2, there were some language changes because we realized that since proxies were not allowed, then we have to remove the proxy language. And so we removed the proxy language, and we also added some language under membership responsibility. And you can see those changes in the track changes. And also, we want to make sure that you notify, if possible, that you can notify the co-chairs or myself about your absence within 2 weeks of the scheduled meeting so that we can ensure that we have a quality meeting. And we just added that language again on page 4. And in the 4th paragraph, where we talk about notifying the Oversight Committee chair and co-chair and the Project Portland manager about your absence 2 weeks prior to the meeting. And if you go back on page 4 to that 2nd paragraph, you'll notice that the language about the proxy has been removed. And on page 5, there was an addition, and that's the green lettering, and it's item G, where we say the chair in consultation with the Prosper Portland project manager, facilitator, and the oversight committee members shall determine the agenda for each meeting. And that was more just a logistic change that we felt that it was better suited in that location than the previous location. We also removed section 7, the agenda, and we placed that under the letter G. It's now part of the co-chair's responsibility. And for further clarification, the last paragraph on page 5, we just said, decisions shall be made by open vote of a simple majority of a quorum. We just wanted to add that for further clarification. On page 6, on the second paragraph, because we wanted to make sure that the subcommittees that are not larger than a quorum, so that a subcommittee can never be an official meeting, we reduced the numbers. And we also, on page 6, when I say we, it was a meeting with Leisha, myself, and Wayne, and we reduced the number of members to 11, and we wanted to discuss that, and just in order to make sure that it accurately reflects our attendance patterns today. And on page 7, there was a removal of the staff and professional services, and also the public testimony. I think that was moved somewhere. Oh, yeah, that was on page 8. You'll see that we placed or made a change under Article 5 and added public testimony as Section 2. And we also made staff and professional services Section 3 of that same, of Article 5, and that's stated on page 9 of your document. And we also made revisions to Article 6 to reflect the changes that was discussed earlier. And Leisha, if you would.
Yeah. So since, Wayne, can you tell us a little bit more about how we are currently operating in terms of which charter we will need to adhere to?
So you're operating under your prior charter. You have a full quorum tonight. So you have the ability to adopt all of these changes by simple vote tonight, or you can hold on to them to review further and decide to make the changes. But again, at a full meeting of the full committee is where you would make the vote to make the change on the charter, like say the number of, well, any of the official changes. In the meantime, the clarification is because it was miswritten and it was written in a way that looked like you could use proxies to form up a quorum, and that part, even though you're operating under the current charter, do not follow that. That was improper advice.
So even though the parts in this charter are technically illegal, the other parts of this charter are the charter that we are able to operate under today.
Yes.
Any question about the changes in the charter as right now?
Yes, I'm actually pretty disappointed in this because we spent so much time working on coming up with this, and I could completely understand that we're saying, okay, this part of the charter is illegal, so therefore let's change this part of the charter. But it seems like we've added on to a number of different things as far as this charter and how we're addressing, and in the original charter it does say that we will review the charter, but we'll review it annually. Where my concern is that if we're on our second charter and it's literally on less than 2 months old, I'm concerned that if we're in month 8 and we have 3 or 4 charters, that now we have more revisions in one of the articles where it says majority vote. So if I want to change the charter next month, we're going to lose track of where our guiding charter is. And so I would like to at least table the vote until I could at least read through this and actually look at and consider what the impacts were, if Madam Chairs would allow.
I just wanted to quickly thank my colleagues for all of their hard work on this. And then my question was going to be, could this be adopted tonight? But I appreciate your comment on wanting to table it for further review so that we could get to the point where we do have a workable charter.
So I think that the meeting that we had, Kim and I and Wayne met, was supposed to be a full charter meeting, and for whatever reason, others couldn't participate. So I agree that we should table this until we have the full subcommittee present to discuss the changes and to determine if this is what we want to present to the full body. So I'm fine with waiting until May because most of the charter is correct. So we would be operating under that charter until that time. So should we just do a consensus that we will wait until May to vote the charter in?
Yeah, all in favor, just raise your green. And then those who are on the phone, I think it's Janisha and
Con.
Aye, I'm in favor.
you're in favor. Han?
Yes.
Perfect. Did Karis make it onto the line?
No.
Okay, we don't have Karis. Well, what I was asked by Alicia, co-chair, is if we give a few moments, we're ahead of schedule, so we're going to pause for about 10 minutes and give opportunity for the Oversight Committee to get a bite to eat, since the food wasn't here when we started. So we're going to pause for a few moments, and then we will reconvene. So,
Yeah, quick question. So does that mean that Wayne's coming back in May, just in case there's any final questions before we, formally approve the charter?
I'll make myself available for the subcommittee and for the full committee meeting, whatever's required.
Thank you.
Sorry.
one more question.
Does this also mean in between the meeting of May and now, is there going to be another subcommittee meeting?
That's up to you. I think that's what I heard Co-Chair Posey proposing.
Okay.
Just make sure everybody's on the full page. Maybe that Maurice, if you had any further input you wanted to have in there or questions. So when you make your vote in May, you're fully confident in it so that you're not feeling like you have to come back to it. But please proceed in good faith. You're doing good work here. There's nothing here that anybody's going to get in trouble for. These are procedural items, and you should be proud of the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Wayne. And real quickly before we break, we had another member of the Oversight Committee join who didn't get a chance to identify herself, so she would do that.
Thank you. My name is Gwen Thompson.
Okay, we're going to take about 10 minutes. I think we've all done what we need to do, so we won't delay. Do we have everyone still on the phone? Shanisha, are you there?
I am still here.
Excellent. Kant, are you there?
Yep.
Perfect. Then we will go back to our outline as identified, our agenda for the evening. And we are at number 5 with our second monthly partner presentation. The Portland Bureau of Transportation Public Involvement Coordinator, Irene Swafferman. Did I get that anywhere close to correct? Okay, wonderful. Thank you and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you guys for having me. I I did not prepare documents for my presentation, so I'm going to speak verbally today, and I'm happy to take the questions that you have and follow up with any information that you want more details on. What I was hoping to do, just as I was connecting with the Prosper staff and some of your leadership, is to share out some information about what PBOT is, what we are responsible for, how we're focused right now, and what it is that I'm doing personally. And then also to give you a sense of the types of transportation projects and programs that we have in this community to help inform how you guys move through your work. So for starters, I would say that, you know, we are a huge bureau. We have over 900 employees, and we are managing a number, billions of dollars worth of assets across the city. We are responsible for all the streets. We are responsible for all the sidewalks, all of the city-owned right-of-way. We are not TriMet, so we don't do most of the transit in the region. We are the owners and operators of the streetcar, the aerial tram. But for the most part, we are managing what's happening on streets and sidewalks. We have a few bridges, but for the most part, bridges are actually owned and maintained by Multnomah County, so we work in coordination with them on that. I think are known in community as being very bike-centric, but our kind of hierarchy of modal priority is that pedestrians are always first for us. So we are always thinking about how to keep individuals safe in the streets. Bikes is next, and autos is kind of last in that pyramid of hierarchy. So we're often making decisions that prioritize how we're supporting pedestrians, then bikes, and then cars. In general, we have kind of a guiding document, the transportation system plan, that is helping to inform how we move through our investments when money comes our way, but also how we're planning out and strengthening the transportation system across the region. And that's a 20-year planning document, so that is available to you all. I would also add that, you know, we join the city and take serious responsibility in the racial equity goals that the city has. And so we are very mindful of the work that is probably important to this committee. We're one of the bureaus that has an equity manager. We have a 5-year racial equity strategy, and we have an equity matrix, which we're using internally to help determine how we're investing all of the funds that are coming to us these days. So when it comes to our priorities, there are 3 main priorities that our bureau has. The first is safety. So for all of the modes of transportation, all of the people that are moving through Portland, safety is always our #1 priority. Our Vision Zero program, you might see the 20 is plenty signs all throughout the neighborhood. Those are a part of our Vision Zero safety program. So we're looking to reduce fatalities and crashes in the streets and ensure that folks are as safe as possible. We are, secondly, prioritizing our maintenance of our infrastructure. So we are constantly having to juggle all of the resources that we have to think about how we're addressing everything from potholes to, you know, streets that need repaving. And then thirdly, we are managing for congestion. We know that Portland is growing extremely rapidly, so we're having to constantly think about and work towards how do we update our transportation system to help accommodate all the people that are coming into Portland. Within that, I would also say we have transportation demand management strategies that are attempting to get folks out of their cars. And so the more options we can give people, the safer we can get them around the city outside of single-use vehicles, you know, it's always a strategy for us. What I do want to flag is that when it comes to the funding that we have and that we are responsible for right now, in a season where it feels like a lot of things are getting defunded, transportation is actually an area that is getting a lot of funding right now. So we got a lot of money committed through the state legislature through House Bill 2017 last year. We also had a gas tax that was passed by Portlanders in 2016, a 10-cent gas tax on top of additional taxes that we receive. And right now, a City Portland City Council is moving through their budget process. Build Portland is a mayoral priority that's really focused on updating and maintaining our infrastructure. So we expect to get a lot of funding out of that strategy as well. And then we also have ongoing revenue streams that come from parking, which we manage, all the smart park and all the street parking. And then we collect development permitting fees. So we are also including all of that. So right now we have a lot of funding. That's exciting because in our key program areas, it means that we are able to do a lot of work that has needed to happen over, for like the last 20, 30 years. So again, Vision Zero is our key priority. The Fixing Our Streets program is a project delivery program that is utilizing the funds and helping to invest in construction that's going to be happening around the city. A lot of it starting this year, and that's coming from the 10-cent gas tax. We have programs like Enhanced Transit Corridors, where we are working to build and maintain infrastructure that can help get folks to and from transit options. We have our Complete Streets priorities, which is how do we ensure that our pedestrians, our bikes, and our freight community especially have the infrastructure that they need to get around the city. We have programs like Safe Routes to School, which is thinking about how to get children and their families safely to and from schools throughout their communities. And then we have programs like the Portland in the Streets program and a community grant program that I manage, where we are also wanting to get folks out into the streets. And so we do event permitting, parade permitting, all types of things that can help bring community together. So we are deploying a new strategy on how to both do that and support community through that, but also how can we eliminate some of the barriers that community members have to our program so that they know what our programs are, that they're accessible, and that we're eliminating things like paperwork and other things and fees that can often serve as the barriers to community. So when it comes to the work that we're doing in North and Northeast Portland, some of which is within the URA that you all are focused on, and some of which is in the neighborhood and adjacent to and kind of connecting into this area. The major project I want to put on your radar is the I-5 Rose Corridor project. And this is a project that is actually it's owned and managed by ODOT, the Oregon Department of Transportation, but the city and PBOT are very much a partner in this project. It is a project that it's a $500 million project, and there is about half of the funding will be going towards highway improvements that are meant to help improve some congestion issues, deal with some safety issues that are happening on the highway level. On top of that, there are actually going to be caps that are built over the freeway, and it's to help increase connectivity in this community, but it's also to help reconnect this community. So we know that the freeway project historically played a role in some of the gentrification issues that have happened here. And so the caps will not be an opportunity to build on the caps, but we see the opportunity for connectivity across the freeway as important when it comes to affordable housing strategies, economic development strategies, et cetera. Another one is the Lloyd to Woodlawn Neighborhood Greenway. So as we're thinking about how to get folks using pedestrian and bike infrastructure, we're building neighborhood greenways, which are streets that are identified to have slower car speeds so that pedestrians and bikes are safer. So we're working right now on a Lloyd to Woodlawn Greenway that would be from the Lloyd area to the Woodlawn area. So it's kind of parallel to the geography of your service area, but for connectivity purposes and for safety purposes, for the folks living in this community, it'll provide a great kind of safety infrastructure. We are constantly thinking about ways to improve Martin Luther King Boulevard. From a safety perspective, it's a part of our High Crash Corridor Network, which is a part of our Vision Zero work. So it's a corridor that we know serves a lot of really important kind of travel options in this community, but we've seen a lot of crashes and pedestrian concerns on that street, and so we're constantly working to improve that. We're also working on and have made some significant investments into signal timing issues on MLK, so that's happening as well. Williams and Vancouver are two corridors that are always important to us. And in the next few years, there will be some work happening on Vancouver to help reduce the conflicts of cars and bikes and transit on that street. Not anything too major, but some of it will be in support of some of the connectivity that will be happening with the I-5 Rose Corridor project. We, through the Fixing Our Streets funding, all of the high school clusters across the city had a dedicated amount of money for our Safe Routes to Schools program, which means that in this neighborhood, there will be some small-scale safety projects that are connected to and getting kids to schools in this neighborhood. So those projects specifically have not been announced, but they will be announced soon. Broadway and Weidler is, again, part of our high crash corridor network. So there is a lot of safety improvements that will be kind of in design in the planning phase in the next few years, running from basically the Broadway Bridge all the way through the Hollywood community. And then this part of town, and especially on the northern end of the town of Portland, Marine Drive, kind of through St. John's, is an important area for freight movement. And so there are a lot of freight improvements that we're constantly making in this part of town as well. So I am parked in the communications and public involvement team, and so I'm constantly thinking about, and especially from a racial equity perspective, like how we are communicating to community what these investments are, how we're making decisions about how we're spending money in the streets of Portland, but also how we're understanding the experience of people in the streets of Portland and how that impacts the goals that we have to manage congestion and maintain our infrastructure and develop infrastructure and all of that. So how I'm focusing the work that I do right now is that I'm really heavily focused in East Portland because we know that that's where a lot of diverse communities are and are moving to. And so really having a concerted effort for us internally to think about how we're engaging community, communicating, but also building out the infrastructure needs out there. And then for different reasons, I'm really focused on Northeast Portland, especially because of this I-5 Rose Corridor project. It feels like an obligation that we have as the city of Portland and with our projects, our partners at ODOT, to really be thoughtful and mindful of the history here, to be extending ourselves and our resources into outreach into this community, explaining kind of all the investments that we have coming in and making sure that we're responding to the needs of the folks that are here, the folks that come here on a daily basis because of the historical significance of a lot of the institutions that they're coming to, but also the folks that plan to return to this neighborhood. So with all the city's kind of right to return programs, thinking about how are we building out the infrastructure that they're going to need as well. If we're bringing, hundreds of families into the apartments that are being built on MLK, and we know that MLK is already a high crash corridor and has pedestrian safety issues, kind of how are we anticipating that? How are we engaging community partners to help us manage those issues? But also, how can we use our program to help our programs and our management of the streets and the right-of-ways to help folks see themselves in this community again? And so for us, that could look like investments into placemaking opportunities where we could help community kind of create identity, or an example of that is that we invested into the historic Black Williams project, where we've put some art that kind of recognizes the Black history in this community on Williams Avenue. So things like that, where folks can come to a community that is not what they left necessarily, but where they can just kind of see themselves and their people here. I'm thinking about other things, I guess, that we're mindful of is the Albina Vision Trust and work that's happening. It's not, it's a long-term vision, but it's kind of for us doing the right things as far as the focus of the people and the intent to bring people and civic engagement back into this neighborhood. And so we are just kind of trying to be in tune with how they're moving through their work, and working a lot to help to just build trust again in this community. So not, can't repair everything, but, you know, we are spending a lot of time and wanting to spend resources in investing into and building relationships with the folks that are here and important community partners that aren't necessarily focused on transportation work, so that they can see the links of their focus on educational strategies and affordable housing strategies and economic development strategies, and kind of understand how that work can connect with and be supported by the work that we're doing in the transportation space. And a part of that is also going to be ensuring that, you know, with all the resources that we have coming into our bureau, it means that we're doing a lot of hiring. Folks that, you know, may be skilled professionals like engineers, folks to do more outreach work, but also seasonal maintenance workers and construction workers and other folks in the trades. That, and we have a lot of contracting opportunities available. We have so many projects to deliver through all the resources that we have that we just simply cannot do it all. Our maintenance operations crew is actually in this neighborhood, so they're on Kirby behind the Legacy Hospital. So we want to ensure that jobs that we have available are open to this community, but that they're clear about what other projects are going out for contract, so that we can be sharing those resources and kind of troubleshooting anything, any access issues and barriers that contractors may have into our work. So that's a lot of very high level information. I guess I want to see if there are any specific areas where you'd like me to share more.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Questions from the committee? Maurice?
Yeah, so you mentioned the billions of dollars that are being spent. You mentioned the opportunities for working for PBOT. And this committee is working on, you know, trying to reduce the amount of displacement. So I'm curious with PBOT, as far as do you track the diversity of the workforce within PBOT, and how are you doing the outreach to the community locally? And are you going to, you mentioned that you had a matrix that you guys were putting together or have internally. Are you going to allow that to be more transparent and opening it up so that the community can also look at it? And do you have goals set? And so are you saying this is where we are right now? This is how many people we want in this community to be working for us. This is how many of the millions or billions of dollars we want to be deployed to the community, not the work that's being done, but actually by businesses, by workers being able to benefit from those billions spent.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to hiring, you know, the city's Bureau of Human Resources is really facilitating a lot of both hiring and then data, like employment data. So I think there are some reports that we get. I think it's gotten a lot more diverse since I've gotten there. But I think that's because of the work, and it will continue to do so because of the work of our racial equity plan. So human resources is kind of a key category for us, in that we have a lot of cleaning up to do with our hiring process to just get people in the door, our recruitment process, our retention process and program. So that is happening. We're also, you know, working to identify new sources of talent. And so trying to think outside of the pools of folks that we're usually reaching out to. I would say from, you know, we have a lot of planners and engineers that are coming in, and there are usually some traditional programs that our folks have been reaching out to because they're the programs they came from. It's PSU and others. So we're working to diversify our partnerships with institutions that can help feed folks into our programs. We the city across the board has the Summer Works program, and so we are utilizing programs like that to bring more entry-level folks into the Bureau as well, because we see that as a way that folks end up staying in the Bureau. So the more that we can open up the doors to more of the entry-level positions across our teams, the more diversity that we get kind of ascending into leadership. For the construction side of our work, the seasonal maintenance workers is kind of a key, again, entry-level opportunity into the pipeline and the construction work. So we're right now in the process of hiring for those jobs. You pretty much just have to be 18 and have a driver's license to get those jobs. And then for contracting, similarly, we are working towards the city's aspirational goals. So we have some reports. We've been kind of doing our own reports internally that haven't been reported out, but we're definitely tracking what our contracting looks like from the DBE, MWESB perspective. We've also made sure that we are disaggregating the categories so that we understand from the women-owned, the minority, and the emerging business perspective what it's looking like, and then can lean on our racial equity goals to say that minority-owned firms are certainly a priority.
And just falling back on one of the previous questions, do you have right now, currently the data that says, okay, we're at this percent in our goal? I know that you have goals for MWESB utilization. Do you have goals internally for your workforce? For the PBOT? And internally, are you looking at saying, okay, if we're going to expend these dollars in these categories, do you have goals for all categories, not only just contracting goals, but expanding that to positively affect this community? And are you looking at more targeted outreach to this community to kind of help with reduce the amount of displacement that can occur because of the impacts in which you're working on?
Yeah. So on workforce goals, I do not believe that we have those. So I can certainly inquire to see if there's a reason why. I think we have been working on strategies to get more folks in the door and ensure that folks have can be retained and can ascend into leadership positions, but I haven't seen us have any kind of hard goals for that. For contracting and kind of local community benefit, I believe there was some stuff there was something that was passed at City Council that intended to use developer dollars to help resource programs that could assist with that. And so I will reach out to the city's procurement office to see how can we utilize a program like that, because I haven't seen us be able to say that within a specific geography that we are going to attempt to meet a specific type of goal. So I can certainly look into it.
Okay, and this is my last question, I promise. Currently, do you have the data? You said you had a matrix. Do you have a data that shows the populations that you currently work for PBOT and their demographics, their location, and excuse me,
Like their residents?
ethnicity, gender, and say, okay, this is where we're at.
Yeah, so I think we should have demographic data available. I don't know that data is going to include whether or not they live in this community. I haven't seen any data reported with that level of detail.
And then you're setting a goal to try to, a stretch goal to go past that. And
so right now, there's no kind of HR goals on hiring, so I'm happy to see if the city is moving towards that or not.
Gwen and then Oscar.
I'm curious, what is a cap?
A cap? It's when you cover the freeway so that you can build a street.
Got ya. You mentioned that it connects communities. How do you determine which communities need connecting with CAPS? I'm curious how that works.
Well, physically, it would connect the communities on either side of the freeway. So from transportation, we're attempting to create more connectivity. And what we acknowledge is that bringing a freeway into community cuts it apart. So, and that has had an impact over time where businesses are not necessarily able to thrive if there's not a lot of connectivity to the economic development that they've brought in. So we see the connectivity as being able to just create more opportunity, which means that more housing, more economic development, more business can come in. The document to kind of look to for understanding what the city is moving towards is the Northeast Quadrant Plan within the Central City Plan. So the Central City Plan is kind of the core of Portland, and so it's the city's plan to revitalize, program, invest in the Central City. The Northeast Quadrant Plan is specific to this geography.
Thank you.
You kind of started going to where my question is leading, but I'm curious to know what PBOT's, or maybe even your ideas in terms of how you may be able to use PBOT's, funds or programs and leverage them with the work that Prosper Portland and PHP and that we're trying to do with this investment in the Northeast community.
So I think the big driver for the city to gather itself around what all is happening in this community is the I-5 Rose Corridor project, because it is such a huge investment in general, and because of the nature of where it is, the historical significance, and all the opportunity that we see here through the Northeast Quadrant Plan. The city, multiple city bureaus have started to gather to better understand what that's going to mean for city opportunities. And so we are in touch with some Prosper teams who are informed about this strategy, who know about the Hill Block project, some housing bureau staff that can speak to the affordable housing strategies, the right to return strategies, other Prosper projects like the Broadway post office site, all of our small scale transportation projects, the general kind of BPS, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability kind of plans for the area. So we're starting to gather and kind of put together like, what are all these initiatives and how can we leverage a $500 million project to help amplify the commitments that the city has already made, but also plan towards how do we leverage each other's programs and investments to help create more connectivity, community building, but also just to more comprehensively tell the story about, we know the city is changing, we know this neighborhood is changing because a lot of people are moving here, but there are and have been intentional kind of policies and investments into this place. And we just across the board know we need to understand it better and then kind of jump on all the opportunity that can come with it. So I don't have all the hard answers yet, but it's kind of cool that we're moving forward with a process for us to better understand that, because I don't know that usually happens.
Do we have a question from the phone? Okay, Alicia.
Of course.
I had a question about the school funding. In terms of the clusters, you talked about being able to fund safe routes to schools, especially thinking about children that may be coming back to the area that have been for school who may live other places. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that money will be spent in terms of determining how much is spent in each cluster?
Yeah, so on our website, fixingourstreets.com, or the program website, there's a project list. And the project list explains how all of the money that we anticipated coming in from this 10-cent gas tax, like how we programmed it. So in different buckets, it says what projects are going to get what dollar amount. The Safe Routes to Schools program is one of those buckets. And within that, each high school cluster has a specific allocation for their projects. So the gas tax came online in 2016. We spent a good year kind of developing the Fixing Our Streets program to figure out how we were going to deliver all the projects of the program. And as a part of that, because we had allocated the Safe Routes to Schools dollar per high school cluster, we then had to engage each high school cluster in a process to identify what were their like small scale safety project needs. So through that, we hosted with all the school districts a number of open houses and kind of public engagement process to gather information about like what are the problems that kids are having getting to school. And then we had a Safe Routes to School Oversight Committee that helped to determine which projects would be prioritized for this funding stream. So I haven't seen the final list yet. I think what they did is they programmed the dollars by high school cluster for the funding we have now, but then they also developed kind of a long-term list. So for the funding that we don't have yet, they've also determined a list of like, here's the other things that all these schools need, and those projects will be funded as we get other funding sources. So I think right now the Oversight Committee helped to finalize the list. It's close to announcement, but they're just kind of finalizing translation to make sure the information's accessible to all of the families who need the information. And then it should be out in the next couple weeks. I think it's end of the month is what I was told, which is a week and a half away.
Thank you.
Thanks, Irene. We appreciate your presentation. Any other questions from the Oversight Committee?
Okay. Thank
Well,
you.
before you go, maybe you can just, from your side of the table, say how the work that, and you kind of spoke to it to a great degree, but what specifically do you think that what PBOT is doing can help to support what the Oversight Committee is doing? Or how can the Oversight Committee be engaged and leverage their voice with PBOT?
Yeah. So I think what you guys are doing with some of the other bureaus is connecting into the advisory committees that other bureaus have. And so I'm sorry that I am not an advisory committee member. Our budget and bureau advisory committee was meeting right before this. And so I think that's how I got put into this position today. So I would say definitely, stay in touch with and track how those advisory committees with us are moving through their bodies of work. The key ones to follow the Bureau and Budget Advisory Committee, so they're helping to inform our city budget process. We have a bicycle, pedestrian, and freight advisory committees. We have a for-hire committee because we also regulate the for-hire industry, so that's the Uber, Lyft, cab, any private for-hire work. So those committees, our Vision Zero Task Force, and our Safe Routes to Schools advisory committee, which is actually kind of sunsetting now, I would say are some key bodies to stay connected with because they're receiving our policy updates and they're also making recommendations to us. I also think that the nature of the work that we do as municipalities, as government agencies, there's a lot to track and follow. And so I'm kind of taking personal responsibility for serving as a translator, for the technicality that comes with policy work and budget work and all of that. I think we need more of us who can both track this work, but also help to share it out across community. And so anything that I've shared today or any information that I can provide, I'd love to see more kind of cross-sharing information so that as you are going out into community, I want you to be informed about all the transportation stuff that's happening, just like you want to be informed about all the housing things that are happening so that you know that your investments kind of have a multiplying effect on other investments that are being made. That, and I think, it's also our work just also as Black people and people of color in the community. Although I sit in the seat as a PBOT representative, I very much have my community's interest in mind. And so I want to make sure that I'm being a connector into the work and that I'm, using this space to also help support the work that I know my people need. So I think that's why you guys have probably committed yourselves to this process with Prosper. So continuing to be in partnership in that way where we can kind of help to inform how these bureaus are moving in the work and moving in a way that's culturally responsive and trauma informed and doing the work that we know needs to be happening and saying the things that reflect a commitment that we know that our community needs and investing in that way. So stuff that we can do together. But I think, going back, just information sharing and kind of being a translator for all of this really big stuff, just helping folks understand that these investments are intended for them and not just the people that are moving to Portland, but that we want to be responsive to their needs and their experience and leverage our resources as such.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Are you going to leave business cards behind?
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation.
And I guess if you guys want anything in writing, I'm happy to follow up with documents. I got all the documents. Thank you, guys.
It'd be fantastic. We love documents. Okay, going to new business, item number 6. Staff report. Alberta comments. Lee Moreland, Prosper Portland.
I'd like to invite Troy Campbell to come up and, and join me. There are several projects that are listed in our action plan that were outside of the $32 million. One of them is the Alberta Commons, and I would like to provide, an update of where we are on that project and others that impact the work that we do. And the Alberta Commons recently celebrated a pre-opening and grand opening of the store, and I know I saw Dorsey there, and I'm hoping others were able to go to the grand opening. And that was just the outcome of a lot of hard work. And the Alberta Commons, as you know, was part of a controversy over a previous decision that was made by Prosper Portland, and it was Trader Joe's was originally going to be the anchor tenant, and then National Grocers stepped in, and so as a result of that, there was a community benefit agreement that was created that governed the development of that project. And the success of that CBA really was the result of a lot of community-driven, community-led work. And that's why I really want Troy to kind of talk about some of the work that was created by 4 committees that was part of the CBA. One was the Retail Tenanting Committee, the other was Construction Workforce, which was led by Tony Jones. The Retail Tenanting, Troy was the lead on that, but Gina Worley and several others really drove a lot of the decision-making that impacted the layout of the building. We also had public art, which originally was only going to be 1 artist, but it ended up being 2 when the selection committee recognized the talent that we had in our community. And we also had a Heinlein plan where while that was not really a community-driven process, we did work with one of our partners, WorkSource Oregon, and we managed to hire 25% of the staff with African American or people of color. And so I just wanted to kind of let Troy kind of talk about some of the special moments of that project.
Sure, yeah, thank you, Kim. Good evening, everyone. And so, as Kim said, I think that probably the things that stand out the most is within this community benefits agreement. It was actually one of the first ones of its kind, and it was birthed out of a lot of pain, though. I mean, it wasn't like a proactive, we're doing this on purpose. It was really a necessary response, a bit of a reaction to the community. But yet in that, there was a way in which the community rallied around and was actually able to realize and actualize a lot of those goals. I think that's important to note. And a lot of what we have walked through that process have actually ended up becoming best practices for a lot of the work that we're doing moving forward. So I would say like that community benefits agreement has actually helped to spawn things like our retail tenanting process, which I'll talk a little bit about around Prosper Portland's new commercial retail affordability efforts throughout the city, where we're trying to preserve commercial spaces throughout the city. A lot of that growth of that program actually stems from what happened and what we are trying to do with the retail tenanting work out the Alberta Commons. So one of the areas, as Kim mentioned, that I did work on was I helped to facilitate a community-led committee around how do we activate the spaces that Prosper Portland would master lease for the next 10 years. So it was a little over 5,000 square feet. And we wanted to, within the community benefits agreement, they said it needs to benefit the community in terms of amenities that are not there. And it also, ideally, we need to reach out to and ensure that small businesses that we cater to are entrepreneurs of color, and even more explicitly that it would be at least priority would be given to African American business owners. And so that was really the charge of that retail tenanting advisory committee. And over the last 3 years,
Yeah.
something like that. I think that's the crazy thing about it is the group stayed together for 3 years through all the ups and downs. And some of the things that they did, they laid out a framework of here's what we feel like we need to have. They wanted to make sure it was a business that wasn't a startup because they wanted them to be successful. They were like, the last thing we want to do is put brown and black folks in this space and they fail. You know, it just, that's not what we want. And so they were very clear on here's what we want to make sure is there. They also took into consideration a lot of the conversations that have happened over the years around the community of what needs to be there. They also spent a lot of time helping us figure out how to actually activate the spaces. We don't have diagrams tonight, so this might not make a ton of sense, but the way in which the spaces currently are, they're facing on Sumner Street. That's a portion of the property that we're master leasing, and they have these roll-up doors. And no one will know this, like no one almost cares how sausage is made, you know, because it's not a good process. You just like the end results. And so even in that whole conversation of having the property face Sumner and having roll-up doors, like months of arguing and fighting with architects and pushing Prosper Portland and the city, why can we not do this? And people finally relented and saw their wisdom. And as a result, I think we have a better product. And so I just want to highlight, those are great examples through and through where I think for us, even as an agency, it proved to be a really important learning lesson of if you're really going to do something with community, that there's a pace, there's a level of receptivity and mutual respect that you need to have. And as a result, like good stuff can actually come out of this. So we're at this place now where we currently have 3 applicants who have applied. We're almost to the point where we can kind of go public with who they are, but they actually fit within the scope of what the CBA intended. They are African-American businesses. They have been in business for a number of years, and we hope that it actually is a positive, outcome, not only to benefit them, but the neighborhood. And it's another thing that we can look and say, it wasn't perfect, it's beginnings, but at the end of the day, when people are committed and motivated, that good things can even come out of some really challenging starts. So that's just the retail tenanting. Maybe you want to talk about some of the construction goals if you think that would be helpful.
We're really excited about the construction goals. Number one was the African American general contractor, which is great. Our goals for subcontractors was 20%, and they exceeded that by 28%. We also, it wasn't perfect. We didn't reach the numbers for our women and apprentice, but we did reach our numbers for overall workforce. I think they call it utilization, and exceeded Prosper Portland 45% and had 49% of minority women and African minority and women and disadvantaged business. So we're really excited about those numbers. And it was very difficult to have to reach the numbers for female and contractors because everyone's struggling with trying to train and utilize women. We had a goal of 12%, and I think we did less than 5%. So that's something that one of those lessons learned and how we need to work with other groups. One of the exciting things too that Tony Jones had a meet and greet with the contractors and some of the potential workers, and they were able to make some really great relationship that lasted long term. And so one in particular, an apprentice was able to find a permanent employment with the Colas, and so it went beyond this project and to a kind of a mentorship relationship. So it was those type of things that happened with this project. And Troy had this wonderful idea of documenting this CBA and the lessons learned in a variety of ways. And so we'll be working on coming up with maybe a white paper, a video, or some interviews so we can kind of transfer this model to larger projects, because this project was only $6 million. And so one of the things that Andrew Kohler said, for a $6 million project, it was a lot of oversight, and we need to utilize this process for larger projects that could have greater impact. and greater utilization of minority contractors. So we're looking forward to having some internal discussion with our D&I staff, development and investment staff, and others to kind of see how we can influence
Love you, Ima.
how we move forward.
Excellent, thank you. Questions from the Oversight Committee?
So I have a quick question as far as the CBA. At the next meeting, can you share that particular document? And also, you had mentioned that there's a lot of community input as far as going forward. How many community organizations were part of it on that community benefits agreement? Just curious. And also, one last question is, because I've worked on a few of these things, and I know that there are people that support it, and then people that stay at the table, and then some leave. And so, with that,
Pardon me, Maurice, I'm sorry. If you could mute your phone, whoever's on, make sure those who are on the line, if you would mute your phone, please. Thank you. Sorry, Maurice.
and so just seeing who actually, if all of them were involved and they all stayed, great. If some of them peeled off, the why behind that. And also, I'm a big data nut, so I'd love to see all the breakdowns of the data because, and one of the things that we've learned in the past is that utilization needs to occur across all industries, all trades. And so when you guys are providing that, to make sure that the data is broken down into all the different sectors would be really interesting. It sounds like you guys did great work. I know you guys had some great contractors involved in that project, and as far as a contractor myself, I'd like to see the lessons learned and try to figure out how to better myself. Thank you.
Sure. So, sounds like there's at least three things I heard from you, Maurice. So, one, yes, we can provide the CBA for you. With respects to who was a part of it and helped craft it, that actually was something that originated prior to both my and Kimberly's time at the agency, but we can definitely find out and within the CBA and maybe get a little backstory to understand.
And the CBA, I'm sorry, but the CBA is signed by all the people who participated in that process, but one organization didn't sign, but, we can easily find that information.
And so, as far as the community groups that signed off,
Yeah, the people who draft the CBA sign the CBA.
yeah. No, I was just curious on how many community organizations, whether like the Urban League or Hacienda or whoever else might have signed on to that particular CBA.
Yeah, we can find that. We can find that for you. And then lastly, yes, I think we can give you some initial numbers and data, but what we also want to do is we really want to kind of codify this experience too. So hopefully we can come up with a document that actually is more substantive. Everyone can just look back, like lessons learned, celebrate the wins, but also be very clear, like call out things that did not go well so that we don't repeat those. So that's something that we're trying to work on immediately so that we can provide. But in the interim, we can definitely at least give you some of the data that we've already gotten from some of the construction goals that we've talked about tonight.
Yeah, one of the things that you could also look at is I know that the city also breaks down the CBA data. And so if you guys are having the city do your MERs and that, it should be fairly easy for them to decipher that data and put it in the same format that they provide for other CBA projects.
Great. Thank you.
We have that data. From the city of Portland, I can't think of his last name, but he was tracking throughout the whole process, and we have the final numbers.
Any other questions from the Oversight?
I have a quick question. This is Con. Can you hear me?
Yes, if you could speak up just a little.
Okay, great. In terms of, I don't know, dogs barking. So my question is that in terms of, Troy, we can talk about the retail side. I know there was a whole bunch of background noises like dogs barking right now, so I couldn't hear you. Can you explain in terms of how do you ensure those retail businesses won't get displaced after 10 years, whatever the contract they have with the owner? Is that in the CBA, in other policies to protect those businesses after 10 years or after 5 years, they don't get pushed out?
Great, Con. Yeah, I can speak to what the current strategy is. So again, we're master leasing around a little over 5,000 square feet. Part of our commitment was to create what we call affordable retail commercial space. I mean, that's depending on where you are. But what that means is that we will subsidize, that we'll start the rent at a subsidized rate for these 3 tenants if they continue to go forward. And the hope was actually to try to find businesses that already had some projections in terms of viability that they could, at a given point in the future, be able to ramp up to what the market rate rent would actually be after 10 years. Obviously, they have if all goes well, hypothetically, and they are in that space for 10 years, each year their rent would actually go up maybe 3 to 5% incrementally. So it still gives them a little run room to make it, but they also need to be thinking at some point down the road, I'm gonna have to pay market value. So we recognize that was part of just that reality, and some of the working backwards was trying to actually find businesses that from the jump wouldn't necessarily be able to pay market value today, but could at least show that they could over time with their projections see their business be able to do that so that it wouldn't be detrimental, and as you said, so they won't be displaced. Another thing we've put in place as an example is all the businesses will have access to business consulting and technical assistance for the first year through MISO or Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon. That's their commitment. Again, that's just an opportunity to say, we want you to be successful in this space, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but you can also, through this technical assistance, hopefully help to get the knowledge you can to be successful. So that's something we're definitely mindful of, and also the businesses recognize too. So we didn't want to find someone who could barely make from their projections the current ask, because that's just going to mean that they're going to always be struggling, and the ramp up is going to be harder. So I hope that helps answer some of the questions, Con, but there definitely is a sensitivity and an awareness around that could be a challenge down the road, and hopefully the businesses are being prepared for that, and they themselves recognize that they need to factor that in as they go along over the next few years.
Leisha.
I do have a follow-up question.
Okay, Con, go ahead.
Obviously, small businesses encounter challenges, recessions. Is the 10-year program, is that assuming the business, if one business go out, decide to quit, is that program continue for 10 years, or how long the program will continue? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. The program will exist for the duration in which we master lease it, so for the next 10 years. So if a business comes and does not make it, we don't want that, but if that was to happen, the next business would also potentially benefit from the same opportunities that the first one was provided. So yes, I think those things are a part of it. And honestly, the benefit of which any business is receiving right now is because we're in that space. Once we are out of that space in terms of master leasing it, then they really are kind of they're at the market value rate. So they have to function and operate as any other business would be in this commercial corridor. But we're hoping, again, that these businesses do well, and there's enough synergy there, and there's enough energy. And because of some of the goals around wealth creation and wanting to have amenities and wanting to be businesses that are, a priority for brown and black folks, that there would also be an energy from the community too. Again, these are all hypotheticals, but it's the best intention of trying to ensure that any business that wants to have retail space, particularly in areas like Northeast where it's becoming increasingly just not affordable, can make it. So hopefully that helps, Con.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Con. Oscar.
Just curious about the process of the selections for the businesses, and if that's already been done. When do the businesses get to move in, and who are the businesses? That kind of.
Yeah, so again, not at liberty to share the businesses, who they are, because they're still kind of working through the final LOI process, and we wanted to give them the space to kind of work through that with Prosper Portland. But the businesses, we found them we had an open application time. I think it was over 6 months where we did outreach and even felt like the initial round didn't, there was concern that not enough people heard about it. So we actually went out an additional 3 months. And so received a ton of interest in applicants. We worked through a local broker who really was able to go show the space and was the first person to talk with each potential candidate to see if this was going to be a good fit. And then from that, the Retail Tenanting Advisory Committee made a selection on the 3 that they felt like fit the profile that they were looking for and would hopefully be the most viable, create the most synergy. And from that point, they now moving forward into the process. And again, if these 3, for some reason, it doesn't work out, we'll continue that process along the way. And the advisory committee will continue to play a role.
Leisha.
So you mentioned the $6 million funding, what's from Prosper Portland to leverage the building of the property?
Yes, well, Prosper Portland sold the property to the developer, but the total construction cost was a $6 million project. I don't think Prosper Portland paid the funds for that, but I'm not sure how that works. But the point I was making that this is kind of a small construction project
Right.
compared to others, and I need to find out who actually pays the $6 million, but it's a small construction project with a lot of oversight compared to some of the larger ones that we work with.
So Prosper Portland didn't give money to the project then through the TIF financing dollars?
Yeah, the place where our money investment will show up at this point is going to be within the retail tenanting portion of it.
Okay.
So the place that we master lease. So like we're going to help with some of the tenant improvements. Also some of the cost of subsidizing the rent. That's where the TIF dollars show up.
So that is in the $3 million here in the plan, in the action plan that we received?
No, this all was
It's
already
outside
money
of
already allotted prior to the action plan going into
I'm
place.
sorry. Sorry, I should have clarified. So at the back of our action plan, there is the other TIF expenditures within the 5-year time frame.
Yes.
And they list out the activities, including the Alberta Commons.
Correct.
And it says budget amount 3,200,000. So I know that's not a part of the 32 million.
But yes, that's correct.
Right.
That's where those dollars are showing up.
It's from the lease, the money spent on the tenanting program.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the question I have to follow up kind of on what Khan spoke about, after the 10 years is up for the master lease, is a part of the CBA that those business owners that are able to stay at market rate have the opportunities to stay? Or does the developer then have the rights to say, we want someone else in here?
Yeah, from my understanding is within the 10 years, they have the option to lease again. But after that 10 years, they are then primarily working with the developer, the property owner. And so to that end, we don't know. It would be out of our control from my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
One thing I can say too, though, what has been good is through this process, the property owner, the developer, has been made aware of the tenants that are being considered, and they have an opportunity to, I guess you call it thumbs up or thumbs down in terms of, so we've really been trying to work with them early on to say, not only are we trying to find, businesses that we feel like create amenities, create opportunities for wealth creation for entrepreneurs of color who need retail space, but we also want this to be something that you feel good about after the 10 years. Again, 10 years is a long time, a lot can happen. And so we've been really kind of upfront, very clear, like, are you good with this? Not just simply, does it not cross any kind of non-compete agreements, which those are natural, but we really want to make sure that they understand, like, we chose these individuals because of this set of reasons, and we feel like it would behoove you to consider, if all goes well in 10 years, to retain them in their space. But obviously, that's going to be up to them to make that decision.
So just a quick question. So the tenants, do they have the ability to sublease? And if they are subleasing, are they subleasing at market rate, or are they subleasing at the discounted rate?
I don't know if that's been determined yet. There's not been a commitment, a signed agreement yet for any of the tenants. They're still working through kind of the LOI process, but that's definitely something to be raised in terms of the option to sublease. But more importantly, I think the unique thing is at the market rate. I don't know.
Just real quickly, could you explain LOI? Just at least what it references?
Yeah, it's just kind of a lease, kind of a leasing agreements. So it's kind of the way in which you say, here's what I need out of the space. Here's what I feel like I can afford. Here's what I feel like I can pay. It's kind of the initial engagement and early kind of contractual language that you begin to have when you want to step into a commercial space.
As far as the subleasing, has Prosper Portland had any type of conversations around that issue? Or is this the first time that this issue's come up?
I believe that in other properties that we have been a part of, subleasing was, I think that's a normal practice in many instances. But in this one, I don't recall that we've actually had a conversation that was in depth of what that would look like. I don't know, Kim, if you can recall. But in my time in the last few years, that's not been something that I remember us talking a ton about. It is I think, if I understand what you're saying, Maurice, at least my understanding of retail tenanting, again, this is a space that I've been growing in my knowledge. It actually is a benefit sometimes for a tenant to be able to have that flexibility, if they want to retain that space, if things happen in their business model, or they to allow it to be subleased. So I don't think that you'd want to take away that opportunity to leverage that, but we just not talked a ton about it from our call.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say to take any opportunities away from anybody, but on the same end of it, if 99% of the space is subleased at market rate, then I don't know if you're achieving the goal that you're trying to achieve.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's why I would say to Prosper Portland to really consider how that language as far as subleasing, I'm not saying it's good or bad,
Yeah.
I'm just saying that it should be well thought out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify my own understanding.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
it sounded to me like you were encouraging micro enterprise businesses, or that you were open to all businesses that were interested in the space, but for those who might benefit from consulting services, that those were made available.
Yeah, so when the Retail Tenanting Advisory Committee, when they kind of put together their kind of ideal profile, one of the things they wanted was to have businesses that had been in it business at least for several years, that this wasn't a startup. And so that could also mean they might have been a home-based business and been doing really well, and they were at a place now where their next kind of point of growth was actually getting into a commercial retail space. And so that was really what they were looking for. In terms of the technical assistance that would come through MISO, with this Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon, I think any business it's always good to have another layer of support as you make a transition into that. Because some of the businesses, this is not their first time in a storefront, but the visibility of it, the place that it is, the synergy, we just thought it would be wise to make that available to them. Like, hey, here's an organization that we feel like would do well in terms of supporting you if you want to take advantage of that, if you feel the need. That's just another kind of layer of support to help them.
Sure, I just wanted to make sure I separated that so I could understand.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Any other questions, Oversight Committee? Oscar?
I guess when I heard the number three businesses, I was kind of surprised that it was so few. So can you tell me, like, what's the total number of businesses, and then which ones, and is it just the three that are going to have subsidized lease agreements?
Yeah, so again, the space we have is about 5,000 square feet. It can be configured in a variety of ways. We feel like the average would have been like 1,100. That seems to be in market, kind of the one that's the most user-friendly, easier to replace if someone steps out. One of the businesses actually felt like they needed a little bit more space. So that's why you could have potentially had 4. Some of the configurations, you could have had up to 5 if the spaces were cut up in a way that made sense. But the ones that kind of rose to the top at this initial phase, just 3 businesses would be able to use up all of the space currently.
And to kind of give you an idea of the space, there's 2 buildings. The one that's located on Sumner and MLK will be sharing space with the developer who has a tenant. So we only have 50% of that building, which is kind of roughly like 3,100. And then the anchor tenant, the National Grocers building, the spot that faces MLK in Alberta, it's a kind of a linear space. It's about 1,800 square feet. The space that will be that one of our tenants will be occupying, and so it's broken up, and it's 5,100 square feet is not a lot of space. But.
Haben and then Alicia.
So I just to kind of piggyback on that, because it's making me think something else now. So you chose the businesses first and then split up the square footage. So there may have been more businesses that wanted to rent the space, but you didn't find a pool large enough to choose more than 3 that you felt rose to that certain level.
No, I think the pool they felt was adequate, but when talking with each business, you say, well, how much, we like what your business model seems like it could work, seems like it'd be synergy with other businesses that are there. How much space would you need? And so based on that conversation, they begin to move things around to say, okay, if you need this much space, here's what we can give you, here's what you would need. So that was the way in which they approached it, was first finding the businesses that felt like were the strongest and had the most synergy, and then asking them how much space do they need, and then from that making a determination on what that would look like. So one business in particular actually said they needed more than kind of the 1,100 drafted up that we had cut up for the Sumner facing property. So that's an example where the committee felt like that's good, that's warranted, and so then we'll go ahead and allow you to have that a little bit more space in order for your business model to thrive.
Right, but if 5 businesses rose to the top, then that configuration would have to be different.
Yeah, I think if you had 5 businesses rise to the top, but again, if one of them said, I need 2,000 to work, we would have to say either we can accommodate you or we can't. And if we can't, could you work with less? And they said, no, I can't. Then
So people stepped back and said, I need this amount of room, and if you can't give it to me, then I'm
that would be And so some people said, I need more. Some people said, this is what I need. Others were like, I'd like to have a little bit more, but I can work within these constraints, and I still feel like my business would do well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us how many people actually applied or tried to get into?
I do not have the number off the top of my head, but I know that we had over 20 applicants.
And only 3
We can get that information.
Yeah, we can get you the information.
Thank you.
And 3 were chosen from that.
And also, I just want to note that many of these applicants had worked with our broker beforehand. We had information sessions, so they had opportunity to kind of talk through the details of their plans, and so it was kind of an informed process, and so everyone came in knowing exactly what the criteria were and how their business plan could fit into this space. So, Harvin?
I actually didn't have a question. I was looking at the time, and it is way past the time for our comments, and I wanted opportunity for the public to give comments. And I was going to propose that we meet the Oversight Committee housekeeping for next meeting, so that we can give the public to give a chance to give comments on all the things that we discussed.
Were there any individuals who signed up? Do we have any? Wonderful. Mr. Posey, we will start with you, and then an opportunity. Thank you, Hobman, for identifying our hour. We are at 7:56, and it's our intent to be as honorable to the 8 o'clock as possible. So, Mr. Posey, come on up.
Yeah, since Irene is here.
We need you to come to the mic, sir, if you'd be so kind. You're going to have 3 minutes for a comment, so if you will give your name, sir, and then your 3 minutes will begin.
My name is James Posey. Can you hear me? Boy, this is some fine music here, boy. I don't know who's putting this on, but it's coming out real good. Anyway, since Irene is here, I didn't hear her mention anything about the smart city concept. And I was curious to know from her whether the Department of Transportation is engaged in the smart city concept and how it impacts this community, because there are going to be a lot of efficiencies and changes in the dynamics of how transportation moves and what the possible advantages could be in terms to people returning back to this community and the planning process and how that occurs. So that's number one. And then secondly, I wanted to mention that on the Alberta Commons piece, I don't think anybody really understands what Kimberly was talking about in terms of the $6 million, how that's such a minuscule amount of money for a construction project with the accomplishments in terms of the minority participation. And if there are some ways to really talk about those successes and how they were able to achieve those successes, that they do that and they do it as quickly as they can. And I think Prosper Portland is really passive in their leadership role to make sure those sort of successful examples are applied across the board, not only to the rest of the city of Portland, but the rest of the regional governments. And so if there is success, and I'm one of the persons that like to look at the numbers too, that we all know about it, so we can, proselytize that those kinds of approaches to how we do business in the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Irene, we'll give you an opportunity to respond, please. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. So I am not deeply engaged in our smart cities work, but luckily we actually have a smart city open house and text expo that is happening next week on April 25th at PCC Southeast Campus from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And so they are going to be sharing information about a pilot project, which will really be kind of the first investment that we will be making into our smart cities work. The pilot project, I believe, is on Hawthorne 122nd Hawthorne and Division. So that work is not starting in this neighborhood specifically, but I would encourage you all to attend that event to get more information.
Very much. Please identify yourself, sir.
All right.
You got 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. For the record, Karanja Cruz. Just want to thank the committee for you guys' commitment, volunteer work. You're not getting paid, but I appreciate you guys serving on this committee. So I had the opportunity to participate in the visioning process of developing the action plan early last year. And I was advocating very strongly for the allocation of grants rather than loans. I noticed even on the cover of the action plan, it says fostering economic prosperity. Just in my one economic class in college, I understand you cannot build wealth through loans. If you look at history, a lot of the immigrants were able to undergird economic prosperity through grants and through land grants and things of that nature. So when I got excited when I saw the fostering economic prosperity, and I got excited when the executive director of Prosper Portland stated that she wanted to focus on multi-generational wealth. And I kind of perked up, got really excited. But then I go back and look at the plan, and it's all loan allocations. And it's broken up into different categories of giving out loans. So they have one grant program, which is the PIP, which we are basically applying for. However, if I want to build economic prosperity, I can't do that through loans. So I was just wondering, as a committee, if you guys can start the conversation with Prosper Portland to maybe revise the action plan, to maybe have allocations of grants that community members like myself can maybe develop proposals from an RFP process, and have you guys maybe review and accept different proposals that community members may have. I consider myself a teacherpreneur. I'm a teacher by trade, but I took a leap of faith to be an entrepreneur, but I'm literally bootstrapping. So I'm still in poverty, barely paying rent, taking this leap of faith, looking for capital, but I don't have the access to capital because I don't have good credit. However, but I'm still in the field of being an entrepreneur, and I'm looking for help. I'm looking for opportunities, looking for grants that can help undergird in our business so we can stay sustainable and be around for a while. I'm in the cannabis industry, and I only represent 1% of Black-owned cannabis retail dispensaries in the state of Oregon. So it's a very white-dominated field. I also represent 0.5 educators, Black male educators in the state, in the nation, well, in the state. So I'm faced with a lot of barriers as I'm on my teacherpreneur journey, and I was just wondering if you guys could start the conversation of maybe revising the action plan to make it more of grant allocations rather than loans.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I don't know if anyone wanted to respond.
I guess okay. I think you were in one of our meetings, our investment reallocation meeting, and I think the next step that we decided is we do want to look at changing these loans into grants, but we want to meet with the Prosper Portland lending officers and the people that put these loans and grants in place to understand why can't we change them to grant? How does that impact the overall 32 million budget so it's going to be a conversation. I'm glad you brought it up again. That's why we're going to have more meetings and we're going to bring it up to the bigger committee, but we want to have more in-depth conversation and get our questions answered so that we can change these loans into grants, but we want to know why, how, and why there are these barriers. And then once we go from that, one of my suggestions was to start a grant for working capital because that is where our community struggles a lot, is to start businesses. And I think that's a very important point that you brought in. We appreciate you joining our subcommittee, and I hope you can keep coming so that you can give us your insights and give your input in the process.
Well, I didn't join. I'm just coming as a public member.
No, I mean join our meetings. Come to our meetings. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. Thanks so much for being here tonight. Thanks to Oversight Committee. We've come to the end of our time. Our next meeting is scheduled for May 17th. And part of the discussion that's happening is how we optimize our time. So if you could continue to plan to be here at 6 for the next meeting, that would be fantastic. Thanks again for being here. Thanks everybody for your work. Have a great evening.
Did you want to?